Welcome to the Quantum Mind Hub. Before we dive into the story, please kindly subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments section below. It helps us bring more story to you. The sun in Umidum village showed no mercy the day Mama Nwakigo discovered a faint cry echoing from behind the towering kola trees. She had gone to fetch some firewood. Her 7 children always left her to do the labor alone, when she saw a tiny bundle wrapped in a torn piece of Ankara cloth. At first, she thought it was just a stray cloth abandoned on the dusty path. But then, she heard that soft whimper, so fragile it barely stirred the humid air. She peered closer and saw 2 tiny fists flailing like a trapped bird. Any other woman might have scooped the baby up with tears of compassion, but Mama Nwakigo's gaze hardened. She had already birthed and raised 7 unruly children on her own. This abandoned infant would be nothing more than a burden. However, a cunning thought flickered in her mind. If she took this child home, she would finally have extra hands to sweep the compound, pound the yam, scrub the dishes, and do all the menial tasks her children always refused to do. There would be no need for wages, just a meager meal, maybe a corner of the floor to sleep on. And so, with a heavy sigh and a heart devoid of genuine pity, Mama Nwakigo lifted the crying baby into her arms. She named her Adaora, meaning daughter of all. Yet in truth, the name was as hollow as a broken calabash. The villagers who heard the story whispered among themselves that maybe the woman had softened, that she had turned a new leaf. But those who really knew Mama Nwakigo suspected her reasons were far from motherly. In her heart, she saw Adaora not as a blessing but as a convenient tool, a tiny pair of hands that would toil day and night without question. From that day forward, Adaora's life resembled a path riddled with sharp stones. Growing up under Mama Nwakigo's roof was anything but comforting. The woman's 7 children, each with a fiery temper of their own, delighted in making Adaora's chores even harder. They would scatter their toys across the yard just as she finished cleaning or deliberately spill palm oil on the floor after she'd spent hours scrubbing it. At mealtimes, Adaora was the last to eat, if there was anything left at all. The scrawny little girl learned early on that the world could be cruel, and no one owed her kindness. But somehow, in the midst of her daily struggles, she found small pockets of joy. Sometimes, she would watch the sky turn orange and pink at sunset, imagining that somewhere out there, life wasn't as punishing as within these walls. Other times, she hummed old folk songs under her breath while fetching water from the stream, letting the calming melody wash over her weariness. Once in a while, a compassionate villager might slip her a sweet groundnut or an extra piece of yam, pity evident in their eyes. Yet no one dared confront Mama Nwakigo. She was a widow with a stern face and a sharp tongue, and people respected her, if not out of genuine regard, then out of fear. Whenever Adaora showed the slightest defiance, she paid for it with bruises on her arms or scolding words that cut deeper than a machete. But even these punishments became a grim comfort in their predictability. Adaora learned that in this world, tears could not save her. Only resilience could. And so her heart hardened just enough to survive the blows but remained soft enough to yearn for kindness. Each dawn promised another day of cooking, cleaning, and caring for Mama Nwakigo's brood. But Adaora held onto a silent, flickering hope that her story would not always be one of suffering. As time passed, Adaora's presence in the household began to shift. Mama Nwakigo's children grew older, ventured into bigger cities like Onitsha, Enugu, and Abuja, chasing dreams of wealth and leaving the cramped village home behind. One by one, they fled, rarely sending more than an occasional letter or meager funds back to the woman who had raised them. The once noisy compound turned eerily quiet, and Mama Nwakigo grew even more bitter. She started to see Adaora not just as an unpaid maid but also as a constant reminder that her own children had escaped her reach. Restlessness settled like dust in the corners of the house. Adaora, too, felt the change. The chores seemed never-ending. Scrubbing, pounding, cooking, tending the little garden behind the house. Though she was now a young woman, the village still saw her as a pitiful figure, an afterthought not worthy of proper respect. Occasionally, a trader passing through the market would remark on Adaora's growing beauty, her slender figure, and the quiet grace with which she carried herself. It was an awkward, unspoken contrast to her grim circumstances. Sometimes, women from neighboring compounds would whisper among themselves, that Adaora is quite stunning, oh, if only she had better luck. But blessings never seemed to come knocking at her door. Mama Nwakigo wasn't blind to these murmurs. She noticed how some men's eyes lingered on Adaora when she went to fetch water or sell small wares at the market. A bitter jealousy coiled inside her. Rather than seeing Adaora's potential as an asset, Mama Nwakigo cursed herself for ever picking up that abandoned child. After all, she'd reaped no reward from all these years of investment. She harbored a gnawing dissatisfaction that only grew with each passing day. When the final child left home, Mama Nwakigo realized she no longer had anyone else to blame for her loneliness or financial struggles. All that remained was Adaora, and she intended to rid herself of that burden by any means necessary. Word spread through Umidum that Mama Nwakigo was scheming to marry off Adaora to the first man who would have her. At first, people dismissed it as another of her dramatic outbursts. They knew Mama Nwakigo for her sharp tongue, often spewing insults at the smallest provocation. But rumor soon became truth when she began approaching village elders, proclaiming that the gods themselves had given her a sign that Adaora should be wed to none other than Oakley, the ragged beggar who lurked at the market square. The idea was so ridiculous that even the elders were stunned into silence. Oakley was a permanent fixture at the dusty crossroads, dressed in tattered rags and crouched behind a broken calabash begging for morsels of food. Some whispered he slept in the abandoned shrine, said to be haunted by restless spirits, only to shuffle to the market each morning, head bowed, hand outstretched. No one really knew his story, and few cared to ask. When Mama Nwakigo laid out her plan, everyone thought it was a cruel joke. After all, who would willingly offer their daughter to a beggar? But Mama Nwakigo was resolute. She claimed she had visited a powerful diviner who revealed that Adaora's destiny was intertwined with Oakley's fate. In truth, she was merely fabricating visions to mask her desperation. She wanted Adaora gone, and Oakley seemed the path of least resistance. With a sense of twisted satisfaction, Mama Nwakigo declared that the wedding would be a small affair, no elaborate feast, no bright music, no dancing under the moonlight. She is no better than a beggar, she repeated, dismissing any protest from the villagers. And so a date was set. The entire village erupted in hushed gossip, both pitying and ridiculing Adaora. Can you imagine? They whispered. A young beauty like Adaora wasted on a beggar. But nobody stood up for her or tried to stop the arrangement. In Umidum, tradition often carried more weight than compassion, and Mama Nwakigo's made-up prophecy, backed by her fierce temper, was enough to silence any dissent. Adaora felt as though her world was spiraling out of control. Each night, as she lay on the cold kitchen floor, she would stare at the flickering shadows cast by the moonlight and wonder if the gods were punishing her for a sin she did not remember committing. She tried to fight back. She tried begging Mama Nwakigo, pleading for mercy, reminding her that she'd served loyally all these years. Yet Mama Nwakigo's heart was as hardened as the mortar where Adaora pounded yam each day. In the rare moments she managed to slip away, Adaora considered running to one of the cities where Mama Nwakigo's children had gone, but she had no money and no real plan. Besides, she feared that if she disappeared, Mama Nwakigo would track her down and inflict an even worse fate upon her. Hope was a fragile thread slipping through her fingers. Her only respite came when she fetched water at dawn. Away from the prying eyes of the villagers, she would linger by the river, letting the cool breeze kiss her cheeks while she sang in a low, haunting voice that carried her sorrow like a leaf on water. One morning, she mustered the courage to share her plight with an old friend, Ojeki, who used to live a few compounds away. But Ojeki shook her head sadly. "My sister," she said, her tone heavy with helplessness, "what can I do? If the gods have spoken, or if Mama Nwakigo insists, who am I to intervene?" The truth was, in this village, a widow's pronouncement held considerable weight, especially one as loud and unyielding as Mama Nwakigo. As the wedding day drew closer, Adaora felt a numb acceptance creeping over her. She wanted to scream, to break free, but every path seemed blocked by a wall of indifference. In the pit of her stomach, she sensed that life was taking a turn from which she might never recover. Little did she know, destiny had already begun weaving a different design for her future. One that went far beyond the dusty roads of Umidum. The day of the wedding arrived like an ominous cloud rolling across a bright sky. There were no festive drums, no dancing maidens adorned in colorful wrappers, and certainly no lively high-life music to set the mood. Instead, a sparse crowd gathered in the village square, their voices hushed as they watched Adaora step forward in a threadbare gown Mama Nwakigo had hastily stitched together from old fabric. She looked both beautiful and tragic, her eyes revealing a well of sorrow that threatened to overflow. Oakley stood beside her, barefoot and disheveled, holding a chipped calabash out of habit. The only nod to traditional ceremony was a small gourd of palm wine, which Mama Nwakigo poured into shaky, broken cups. When Adaora was told to kneel and offer Oakley the palm wine, tears welled up in her eyes, and a faint tremor coursed through her hands. The villagers snickered under their breath, a few openly pointed and mocked the mismatch. Wedding of shame, one of them hissed. Others rolled their eyes as though this entire spectacle was just another day of village drama. But behind those mocking stares, a few felt a pang of pity, knowing that life had stacked its deck unfairly against Adaora. She drank from the gourd, then offered it to Oakley, officially sealing the union. No blessings were sung, no prayers of prosperity were uttered. Even the village elders, who typically presided over weddings with lavish pomp, seemed too uncomfortable to participate wholeheartedly. The quiet that followed was excruciating. Afterwards, Mama Nwakigo turned her back and walked away, not even bothering to hide her relief. There would be no feasting, no after-party. Adaora stood motionless, feeling as though her soul had been scooped out of her body. The weight of her new reality pressed down on her shoulders. Married. To the beggar of Umadam. In that moment, she believed any last spark of hope had been extinguished forever. But that very night, as crickets sang their lullaby outside the small hut she now shared with Oakley, the winds of fate began to shift. Oakley's demeanor transformed after sunset. Gone was the stooped figure scrounging for scraps. He stood taller, his posture steady, and there was an eerie calm in the air that made Adaora's heart pound. At first, she thought she was dreaming as she watched him gather a small bag from a hidden corner. Without explanation, he beckoned her to follow him into the forest that bordered the village. Fear and uncertainty churned in her stomach, but something in his eyes pulled her forward as if he held a secret she desperately needed to know. The forest at night was both enchanting and terrifying. The moon cast a milky glow on the lush greenery, illuminating the path so they could see where they stepped. Shadows flickered around them like spirits dancing in the underbrush. Oakley trudged forward with purpose, occasionally pausing to glance back at Adaora as though reassuring her silently that she was safe. Finally, they reached a small clearing by a towering irako tree. He turned to her, his eyes reflecting moonlight like polished stones. Adaora, he began, in a voice far more eloquent than she had ever heard him use in public. There's something you must know. She could hardly breathe, torn between curiosity and apprehension. He closed his eyes for a moment as if weighing how much to reveal. Then he told her a story, one that defied everything she believed about the man she had just married. He spoke of a hidden kingdom called Edu, of royal bloodlines betrayed and cast into exile, and of unimaginable wealth cloaked in secrecy. Each word felt like a chisel, carving away the identity of the beggar she thought she knew. In the hush of the forest, Adaora's tears began to flow, not from sadness but from an overwhelming sense that her life was about to take a turn she could never have anticipated. That night, under the canopy of stars, Oakley stripped away the last fragments of his beggar disguise. He explained that his real name was Obinna Chukwuma, the rightful heir to the long-hidden throne of Ida Kingdom. The tears that had glistened in Adaora's eyes transformed into astonished silence as she watched him recount the saga of his lineage, a family tree deeply rooted in honor yet scarred by treachery. Generations ago, Obinna's ancestors were forced to flee the kingdom when a power-hungry uncle staged a coup, scattering the rightful royal heirs. The tradition that followed was both a curse and a shield. The males in the bloodline would disguise themselves as beggars to avoid detection while they scouted the land for a woman pure of heart, someone who could see beyond wealth and titles. I had to live like this to truly understand struggle, hardship, and the nature of people's hearts, Obinna explained. His voice trembled with both relief and lingering sorrow. Many see poverty and turn their backs. But you, Adaora, you never ridiculed me. Even in your deepest suffering, your eyes held empathy. 1,000 questions burned within Adaora, but all she could utter was a choked whisper, "Why choose me?" His face softened and he reached for her hands, calloused from years of labor. "Because a queen who knows pain becomes a guardian of compassion," he said gently. The forest seemed to hum with ancient energy as though bearing witness to the unveiling of a long-lost legacy. Adaora's heart pounded with a mixture of awe, skepticism, and an unfamiliar sensation, hope. The revelation felt both grand and terrifying. For the first time in her life, she caught a glimpse of a future that didn't revolve around beatings, chores, or the scorn of others. Standing there beneath the age-old Irako, she realized she was on the cusp of a transformative journey, one that would forever redefine who she was and perhaps who she was destined to become. Despite the magnitude of Oakley's, now Obina's, revelation, returning to their little hut that night felt surreal. Edaora didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the rotting straw that formed their roof, wondering how someone of royal blood could find the humility and strength to endure the scorn of an entire village. Occasionally, she glanced over at the man who slept beside her, cloaked in secrets but now bared to her in honesty. Morning arrived with an ordinary hush, as though the night's revelations were merely a dream. Yet the weight of the truth pressed on Edaora like a thick blanket. She went through her usual chores, fetching water, stoking the fire for breakfast, and tidying up the hut, each action tinged with the realization that her new husband was not at all who the world thought him to be. Later that day, Obina called her outside, under the shade of a mango tree. He spoke in a low tone, revealing the next step. They would travel to Lagos, where he had discreet contacts, loyal allies of the Edu royal family who had been awaiting his signal. Edaora's heart fluttered at the mention of Lagos. She had heard about the bustling city life, the skyscrapers, the endless traffic, the opportunities that sparkled like neon lights in the night. Yet she had never imagined stepping foot beyond the dusty roads of Umidum. The idea thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. They agreed to keep their departure quiet. There was no need to invite scrutiny or gossip. With only a small bag of essentials, they planned to slip away at dawn in a rickety bus that stopped by the village once every 3 days. Edaora's mind raced. She thought of Mama Nwakigo, who would probably rejoice at her permanent absence. She thought of the villagers, who might scorn or envy her if they found out the truth. But most of all, she thought about this unknown journey, a rare chance for freedom, transformation, and a kind of belonging she had never known. The night before they left, Edaora stood outside, watching the moon cast silver ribbons on the dusty ground. For the first time in her life, she felt the faint glow of something bright and encouraging possibility. Their journey to Lagos began before the sun crept over the horizon. With a single bag shared between them, they boarded the old, creaking bus. The driver, half asleep, barely gave them a second glance. As the vehicle rumbled through winding roads, Edaora pressed her forehead against the window, marveling at the shifting scenery. Villages gave way to towns, dusty paths transformed into tarred roads. Each kilometer felt like a step away from her old life, a life filled with scorn and servitude. Obina sat beside her, uncharacteristically quiet. She guessed his mind was brimming with thoughts of reunions, clandestine alliances, and the weight of his royal birthright. When they finally arrived in Lagos, the rush of the city assailed her senses, the blaring horns, the hawkers weaving through cars, the towering buildings scraping the sky. It was exhilarating and overwhelming all at once. Edaora clutched Obina's hand, fearing she might be swept away by the sheer energy of the metropolis. They navigated through crowded streets until they reached a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. Waiting there was a man named Uncle Emeka, a distant relative of Obina's, who greeted them with teary-eyed relief. "Welcome home, my prince," Uncle Emeka said, bowing slightly. Edaora nearly laughed at the absurdity. Just days ago, everyone in Umidum saw her husband as a filthy beggar, and now he was my prince. But she swallowed her amusement, sensing the gravity of the moment. Over the following days, a sort of secret court convened in that modest apartment. Advisors, once scattered by the kingdom's downfall, trickled in to pay respects to Obina. They laid out scrolls of genealogies, discussed strategies to reclaim the Edu throne, and whispered about the urgent need for a queen who could unify hearts. Edaora listened from the sidelines, feeling out of place yet strangely energized. She realized that while she might not have been born into royalty, her own hardships had given her a resilience and empathy that these royals desperately needed. Each night, as she lay in the unfamiliar fort of a proper mattress, she marveled at how drastically her life had changed within mere days. Uncle Emeka wasted no time in setting Edaora on a new path. To stand beside the prince as queen, he insisted, one must be adept in etiquette, communication, and the proper bearing of a royal woman. The very words felt foreign on her tongue, but she was determined not to disappoint the people who had placed their faith in her. So began her transformation, guided by a series of tutors who taught her everything from the refined manner of serving tea to the complex art of public speaking. At first, Edaora struggled mightily. She stumbled over her words, spilled drinks, and found the formalities suffocating. But she pressed on, remembering how her entire life had been one long series of trials. If she had survived Mama Nwakigo's abuse, she could certainly master the elegance of a curtsy. Each small victory emboldened her. One day, she correctly balanced a book on her head without letting it drop, a standard exercise in poise. Another day, she navigated a polite conversation with an influential Lagos socialite who found her refreshingly genuine. With each lesson, Adaora discovered something unexpected within herself, an innate grace, tempered by humility, that touched people's hearts in a way no polished aristocrat could replicate. Obinna watched her progress, his eyes shining with pride and relief. He had chosen her for her inner strength and compassion, but even he seemed dazzled by how quickly she adapted to this new world. Yet beneath the surface, a flicker of anxiety lingered. Adaora worried she might lose herself in the process of becoming queenly. In moments of self-doubt, she recalled the nights she slept on a kitchen floor and the tears she cried by the moonlit river. She clung to those memories as anchors, determined not to forget where she had come from, or the countless souls in Umadam who still lived in darkness and despair. If she was to be a queen, she resolved it would be one who sought justice and mercy for the voiceless. As she grew in confidence, Adaora began brainstorming ways she could give back to others, particularly children who faced the same cruel fate she once did. She discussed her ideas with Obinna, who listened with a contemplative smile. While others in his circle focused primarily on reclaiming the Edu throne, Adaora's mind teemed with visions of shelters, schools, and healthcare for those who had nothing. One afternoon, she approached Uncle Emeka with a carefully outlined plan for a charity organization. He was taken aback. "My child," he said gently, "we are on the verge of revealing Obinna's true identity to the world. We must concentrate on that." But Adaora stood firm. "Those in need do not wait for thrones to be claimed," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. After some deliberation, they agreed to begin small, gathering donations from Obinna's loyal supporters and setting up a modest outreach program in Lagos for abandoned children. Word spread quickly among the local community, and within weeks, donations poured in food, clothing, books, and even funds to pay rent for a safe house. Adaora visited that safe house daily, personally interacting with the kids who clung to her the way she had once clung to any scrap of kindness that came her way. Each child's story echoed pieces of her own past, and their gratitude made the challenges of her new life worthwhile. Behind the scenes, Obinna's identity was inching closer to public revelation. Whispered conversations became more urgent, and there was talk of a grand event in Lagos where the Beggar Prince would finally declare his lineage. Adaora steeled herself for that moment. She knew that if Obinna rose, she would rise with him, and that her every move would be judged by both the harsh eyes of the aristocracy and the curious gaze of ordinary citizens. Yet no amount of etiquette training or philanthropic work could fully prepare her for the tidal wave of scrutiny that was about to crash into their lives. The day of the big reveal dawned with a quiet air of anticipation. Adaora wore a flowing lace gown adorned with subtle embroidery, her hair woven into an elegant style that still hinted at her humble roots. She looked into the mirror, recalling the day Mama Nwakigo thrust her into the arms of a man the whole village called a beggar. The irony brought a bittersweet smile to her lips. Now she stood on the brink of unveiling a secret the world never saw coming. The venue was a high-profile conference hall in the heart of Lagos. Dignitaries, journalists, and curious onlookers filled the seats. Cameras flashed, and voices murmured in hushed excitement. Obinna appeared on stage, dressed in a regal attire that had been hidden away for generations. The transformation was breathtaking. No longer did he resemble the dusty figure hunched over a calabash. He stood tall and resplendent, each step resonating with the legacy of his ancestors. A hush fell over the crowd as Obinna told his story, how he grew up in exile, concealed by ragged clothes, passing through villages to understand the people he was meant to serve. He spoke of Adaora, the woman who had unknowingly married him at his lowest point, whose heart shone brighter than any jewel. The audience broke into thunderous applause, some with tears in their eyes. Cameras flashed in a frenzy, capturing every angle of the newly revealed prince and his queen-to-be. Among the reporters was a persistent young woman who asked Adaora directly, "What made you trust him, especially when everyone else saw him as a beggar?" Adaora paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because no matter how torn his clothes were, his kindness shone through," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. And I believe true royalty is measured by one's capacity for compassion, not by wealth or titles. The statement rippled through the crowd, igniting social media debates and turning their story into national headlines. In that moment, Adeora felt both exhilarated and vulnerable. She was stepping into a spotlight she never asked for, armed only with her conviction and the love she shared with Obinna. In the weeks that followed, Adeora's face graced newspapers, online platforms, and talk shows. People hailed her as the Queen from the Bush, a moniker both affectionate and somewhat belittling. She was interviewed on morning TV programs where she recounted how she'd been found in the bush, raised in neglect, and married off to a beggar who turned out to be a hidden prince. The public was enthralled by the real-life fairy tale unfolding before their eyes. Yet beneath the sensational headlines, Adeora's transition into royalty was anything but seamless. The aristocracy in Lagos and beyond viewed her with suspicion if not outright disdain. Some whispered that she was an opportunist who capitalized on Obinna's hidden status. Others criticized her charitable ventures, calling them mere publicity stunts. Despite the pushback, Adeora held her head high. She poured her energy into the charity, which expanded rapidly. She visited orphanages, helped fund scholarships for underprivileged youth, and set up a medical clinic in a low-income neighborhood. Her hands-on approach endeared her to many ordinary citizens who saw in her a reflection of their own struggles. Whenever she felt overwhelmed by the paparazzi or disheartened by snide remarks, she reminded herself of where she had been. She recalled the kitchen floor where she once slept, the beatings she endured, and the cold sneers from villagers who thought her worthless. Each memory fueled her resolve to become a queen who served the people rather than a figurehead ensconced in luxury. Meanwhile, Obinna dealt with the complexities of restoring Edu's legacy. Old foes resurfaced, questioning his legitimacy. Documents had to be authenticated, tribal elders consulted, and alliances forged with other royal families. Though it was a whirlwind of negotiations and diplomacy, he found solace in Adeora's unwavering support. Their bond had been forged in hardship, and that foundation gave them the unity to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they were weaving a new narrative, one where lineage and compassion walked hand in hand. Months passed in a haze of official duties, interviews, and philanthropic endeavors. Adeora and Obinna found themselves at the heart of a growing social movement that valued empathy over prestige. Admirers dubbed them the People's Royals, an embodiment of hope for a generation tired of the same old hierarchies. And yet, in the midst of their newfound status, Adeora never forgot Umidum, her village of shadows and silent suffering. She spoke to Obinna about returning, not in disguise but in all the glory they had uncovered, to show that miracles could sprout from even the harshest soils. Obinna supported her wholeheartedly, though he warned that such a visit might be met with mixed reactions. "Mama Nwakigo," Adeora whispered one evening, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of suppressed emotion. "She won't exactly roll out a welcome mat." In truth, Adeora felt an undercurrent of bitterness whenever she thought of the woman who had treated her as a servant. She knew that confronting her adoptive mother could trigger an emotional landmine. Yet she also recognized the power of forgiveness, for her own healing, if not for Mama Nwakigo's redemption. So they planned a return to Umidum, coordinating with local authorities to ensure safety and a semblance of order. When the day finally came, Adeora could hardly keep her heart from hammering in her chest. Memories washed over her as their convoy rumbled down the dusty roads she once walked barefoot. With each turn, she recalled the daily beatings, the chores, the mocking laughs of villagers. But she also remembered the moonlit nights by the river where she found solace in her own quiet songs. The entire village seemed to have gathered at the entrance, staring in disbelief at the motorcade bearing a once wretched Adeora, now shining in regal elegance. Children chanted her name as though she were a heroine in one of their folktales. And maybe she was. This was her comeback moment, a chance to not only reclaim her dignity but also to rewrite the narrative of her origins. Little did the villagers know that the biggest drama was still to unfold. Stepping out of the sleek vehicle, Adeora could almost feel the village's collective heartbeat, thudding with curiosity, envy, or perhaps even regret. Her eyes swept over the familiar faces of people who once ignored her plight or ridiculed her for her misfortune. She saw the market women whispering behind their hands, the local men who had occasionally offered her pitying glances now shifting from one foot to another in palpable discomfort. Obina, resplendent in a richly embroidered outfit, stood beside her, offering silent support. A group of village elders approached. Their foreheads were creased with a mixture of shame and awe. "Welcome back," one of them said, clearing his throat nervously. "We heard about everything." Adaora managed a polite nod, her expression serene. Inside, a tempest of feelings whirled: betrayal, hurt, and a raw longing for justice. She could almost taste the years of scorn still lingering in the dusty air. Slowly, the crowd parted to reveal a trembling figure crouched near a broken stool. It was Mama Nwakigo, aged beyond her years. Deep lines etched her once hard face, and her eyes were full of an emotion Adaora struggled to name: fear, regret, or perhaps both. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mama Nwakigo staggered forward, trying to muster her usual bravado. "So, the gods truly favored you," she croaked, her voice stripped of its former authority. Adaora swallowed hard, recalling every insult and slap that woman had dealt her. A hush enveloped the gathering, tension crackling like lightning in a storm cloud. People held their breath, waiting for Adaora's reaction. Would she denounce the woman, shame her publicly, or demand penance? In that suspended moment, Adaora felt a surge of empathy, a trait she had clung to even when the world gave her no reason to. She saw not just the woman who had abused her, but a lonely, bitter widow who had never known true love or security. Adaora stepped forward, heart pounding. The crowd, including Mama Nwakigo, braced for words that could either shatter or redeem. Softly, Adaora bowed her head in acknowledgement. The gesture surprised everyone, most of all Mama Nwakigo, whose lips quivered. Adaora then spoke, her voice echoing across the silent courtyard. "Mama Nwakigo, you gave me a name, even though you never gave me love. For years I resented you. But in a strange twist of fate, your actions led me to the journey that brought me here today." She paused, letting the words sink in. The older woman's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to conceal them with a trembling hand. Adaora continued, "I won't pretend I have forgotten the suffering. But I have learned that holding onto bitterness only adds more weight to my soul." The villagers shifted uncomfortably, some wearing expressions of guilt. Perhaps they recalled how they too had failed to protect the girl they now hailed as queen. Adaora stepped closer, her posture poised but not haughty. "I came here not for revenge," she declared, voice quavering with raw honesty. "I came to extend a hand of peace and to show that no matter where we come from, we can rise above our past." In that moment, something broke inside Mama Nwakigo. Her once fierce spirit seemed to crumble, replaced by a profound sorrow. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing openly. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The proud, domineering widow was now nothing more than a penitent figure at the feet of the very girl she had tormented. Adaora knelt down, lifting Mama Nwakigo gently. The two women looked at each other through tears, one offering silent forgiveness, the other seeking absolution. It was a sight that left the villagers stunned. By all cultural logic, Adaora had every right to scorn or punish her. Instead, she chose empathy, breaking a cycle of cruelty that had long shackled her spirit. In that act, Adaora emerged not just as a queen in title, but as a queen in heart, a rare embodiment of grace that went beyond ceremony or lineage. The emotional crescendo of that moment lingered in the air, as though even the birds and insects knew something monumental had just occurred. Slowly, the crowd found its voice in scattered murmurs of relief, approval, and perhaps a tinge of shame. Adaora helped Mama Nwakigo to her feet, and the two women stepped aside to talk in private. Under the same kola tree where the infant Adaora had once been found, they spoke in hushed tones. Mama Nwakigo's voice shook with regret as she confessed the real reason she had taken Adaora in, to have an unpaid maid for her 7 children. She admitted she had never intended to love her. Her words were blunt and brutal, but there was a strange release in the truth. Adaora, listening intently, wept softly. She felt an odd blend of hurt and pity, but also the sense that understanding Mama Nwakigo's twisted motivations would help her move on. "I see now," Adaora finally said, wiping her tears. "You didn't know how to love because maybe no one showed you how." Mama Nwakigo opened her mouth, but words failed her. Eventually, she whispered, I'm sorry." The apology was awkward, unpolished, but genuine. Adaora nodded, placing a gentle hand on the older woman's shoulder. "That apology sets both of us free," she responded, voice trembling but resolute. Not far off, Obina watched them, his heart swelling with admiration for Adaora's capacity to forgive. He approached quietly, extending an invitation to Mama Nwakigo to visit them in Lagos. It was a gesture Mama Nwakigo never expected. Whether she would accept or not remained to be seen, but the offer alone was a beacon of reconciliation. Word of the reconciliation spread like wildfire through Umidam. People who once mocked Adaora found themselves in awe of her. From that moment on, the dynamic in the village shifted as if the land itself breathed a sigh of relief. The rumor mill focused less on derision and more on celebration, making it clear that Adaora's return had ignited a spark of hope for change. After the emotional encounter, Adaora and Obinna spent a few more days in Umidam, during which they helped launch a new community center funded by their charity. The center was designed to offer vocational training for youths and support for single mothers, echoing Adaora's own experiences growing up without a nurturing family. Her eyes lit up whenever she spoke of her plans. People gathered around her, listening with rapt attention as though each word she uttered opened doors to new possibilities. In quiet corners, some villagers apologized to her directly, recalling their own complicity in her suffering. Adaora accepted each apology with a gentle smile, her focus more on moving forward than on recounting past wrongs. Still, she couldn't help but feel a bittersweet pang each time she noted how eagerly they now embraced her, driven partly by her elevated status. Regardless, she chose to use her influence for the betterment of the community. To her, that was the true essence of rising above adversity, turning personal pain into collective gain. Meanwhile, Obinna used his time to converse with the elders who had presided over the wedding of shame. He explained his real background, not in a tone of gloating but with humility. The elders, once too proud to question the ritual they oversaw, now listened with humility of their own. Their wrinkled faces reflected an understanding that tradition must evolve, especially when it fails to protect the vulnerable. On their final evening in the village, a small reception was held in the newly built community center. The dusty floors were replaced with cool cement, and lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow. People gathered to eat, drink, and dance to lively drumming. A stark contrast to the silent, joyless wedding Adaora once endured. As she and Obinna shared a dance, she caught glimpses of Mama Nwakigo smiling faintly from a corner, and the moment felt surreal. Here she was, the same young woman once ridiculed for being forced to marry a beggar, now celebrated as a symbol of hope. It was an evening of quiet triumph, a rare instance where fate allowed for both closure and new beginnings. Returning to Lagos, Adaora and Obinna found their workload multiplied. The public had grown more fascinated than ever after hearing of their recent trip to Umidam. Calls flooded in from philanthropic organizations, journalists, and even foreign dignitaries curious about the bride of the beggar prince. Some saw it as a Cinderella story, others recognized the deeper truth, a tale of two souls who found each other amid adversity and used their unity to bring light to others. Despite the external whirl of attention, Adaora's internal journey was one of continued self-reflection. She noticed how easily she could slip into the trappings of royal life, lavish dinners, designer clothes, and endless admiration from strangers. A part of her relished the comfort she had once been denied. Yet another part remained cautious, remembering the countless faces in Umidam who still struggled daily. This duality fueled her commitment to expand the charity initiatives. The modest outreach center in Lagos now branched into multiple neighborhoods, offering tutoring, healthcare programs, and community-driven skill workshops. She also stayed in constant communication with the new community center in Umidam, ensuring that the programs ran effectively. Each night, she and Obinna would share stories of the day, from the formalities of high society to the down-to-earth realities of people benefiting from their projects. They laughed at the ironic twist that they, once cast out as rejects, were now in a position to uplift countless lives. The synergy between them deepened, bound by gratitude and a sense of purpose that transcended mere romance. Still, beneath the glow of their achievements lay the looming question of Ida Kingdom's restoration. Traditional advisors began pressing for a ceremonial coronation, urging Obinna to reclaim his ancestral throne more openly. There were legal and cultural procedures to navigate, complex steps that would require cooperation from governmental bodies and other long-standing royal families. Obinna hesitated. So did Adaora. They knew that stepping further into royalty would expose them to even greater scrutiny and bring heavier responsibilities. Yet, their hearts told them that stepping into one's destiny, no matter how intimidating, was a path they were meant to walk together. A significant turning point arrived when a formal delegation from Edo comprising chiefs, historians, and spiritual advisors appeared at their Lagos home. With solemn faces and ceremonial garb, they presented Obinna with a staff carved from rare mahogany inlaid with gold symbols representing the lost heritage of Edo. According to tradition, the staff was the key to a hidden shrine located deep within the region's forests. Legend had it that only the rightful heir of Edo could enter and awaken the ancestral spirits, thus cementing his claim to the throne. Adaora watched from the sidelines, her heart thumping. She understood the gravity of this moment. Accepting the staff meant Obinna was no longer just a man with a royal secret, he was stepping fully into his role as a king destined to restore a kingdom. The delegation insisted on performing certain rites to secure blessings for the royal couple. Sensing Adaora's hesitation, an elderly chief with kind eyes explained, "We do not merely welcome you as our queen because you married our prince. We do so because the spirits of our ancestors have seen your heart." Tears pricked Adaora's eyes. She realized that in a world rife with status and political maneuvering, this was a rare recognition of her character. She recalled the times she felt invisible or abused, longing for a single person to see her worth. Now, an entire kingdom's elders were embracing her as a beacon of hope. It was humbling in a way words fail to describe. Without further delay, Obinna carefully took the staff, then turned to Adaora, who placed her hand over his. Together, they signaled their acceptance of the kingdom's call. In that solemn yet hopeful gesture, they committed themselves to fulfilling not just a generational prophecy but also a moral obligation to lead with empathy, justice, and humility. In the hush that followed, Adaora felt a quiet but profound sense of destiny wrapping around them like a royal cloak they had never chosen but now wore with unwavering resolve. Preparations for the journey to the heart of Ida Kingdom began almost immediately. A small entourage was assembled, including historians, spiritual leaders, and a carefully selected security team. The plan was to travel discreetly to the extent any royal procession could be discreet and perform the sacred rituals at the hidden shrine. Only after these rites would Obinna, now formally recognized as Obinna Chukwuma II, be crowned in a ceremony open to the public. For Adaora, the days leading up to their departure blurred in a mix of excitement and nerves. She balanced last-minute etiquette drills with philanthropic events, mindful that her every action now represented the soon-to-be-restored monarchy. The media clamored for details, but they and Obinna offered only vague statements about a cultural pilgrimage. Yet word inevitably leaked, generating a ripple of national curiosity and global intrigue. When the day arrived, they boarded vehicles bound for Edo's dense forests. Along winding roads and thick groves, Adaora felt her pulse quicken. The air grew heavier, tinged with ancient energies she could almost sense in her bones. Finally, they reached a remote area where the vehicles could go no further. From there, they proceeded on foot, guided by elders who chanted ancestral songs in hushed, reverent tones. The forest canopy was dense, sunlight filtering through leaves to create shifting patterns of light and shadow. It felt as though they were traversing the pages of a centuries-old saga. At last, they arrived at the hidden shrine, a clearing ringed by towering trees whose massive roots formed natural arches. In the center stood a small structure carved from stone, overgrown with vines and lichen. The chiefs explained that generations had passed since anyone was deemed worthy to enter. Obinna gripped the mahogany staff, and Adaora watched his face tighten with a blend of awe and trepidation. Stepping forward, he pressed the staff against an ornate emblem on the shrine's door. A low rumble echoed, as though the spirits themselves were waking. In that moment, Adaora felt a surge of emotion so intense it nearly buckled her knees. Love for the man she stood beside, reverence for the history that shaped them, and a breathtaking sense of possibility for the future they were about to usher in. The shrine door groaned open, revealing a dimly lit chamber draped with cobwebs and flickering torchlight. Adaora and Obinna entered, followed by the spiritual leaders who chanted incantations in an ancient dialect. The walls bore glyphs and symbols that recounted the founding of Edo, legends of mighty ancestors, epic battles, and the glory of a kingdom nearly lost to betrayal. Each step felt sacred, the air thick with the weight of hundreds of years of unspoken stories. At the center of the chamber stood an altar adorned with a single ivory mask, a relic believed to carry the essence of Edo's first ruler. Obinna approached it slowly, his heart audible in the silence. Placing the staff on the altar, he knelt down, signaling his willingness to assume the burdens of leadership. In a gesture that felt deeply intimate, Adaora knelt beside him, laying her hands over his. The chanting intensified, echoing against the stone walls until it felt like the spirits themselves were singing. A sudden gust of wind rushed through the chamber, extinguishing the torches. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the faint glow of sunlight that filtered through small openings in the chamber's roof. Then, just as abruptly, the torches rekindled, ignited seemingly by an invisible force. The elders gasped in astonishment, the spiritual leaders began to weep with joy. They declared it a sign that the ancestors had accepted Obinna's claim and welcomed Adaora as queen. Outside, the entourage who remained in the clearing heard a distant roar of thunder in an otherwise cloudless sky. To them, it was further proof that the rightful king had been chosen. Emerging from the shrine, Obinna's eyes shone with a radiant calm, as if he had communed directly with the spirits of his forebears. He extended his hand to Adaora, and together they walked back into the sunlight, greeted by the cheers of those who had come with them. In that instant, a new chapter of Edu began, not with conquest or wealth, but with humility, compassion, and the unwavering commitment to serve. Word of the supernatural occurrence spread swiftly, adding yet another layer of awe to the legend taking shape around them. The formal coronation took place days later in a grand, open-air ceremony at the heart of Edu's revived palace grounds. Dignitaries from across the country, including political leaders and fellow royal families, attended the event. Huge banners emblazoned with royal insignia flapped in the breeze. Traditional drummers, dressed in flowing robes, played rhythms that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. As part of the ceremony, Adaora walked a ceremonial path lined with rose petals and palm fronds, flanked by young girls singing praises of the new queen. Her attire was regal yet reflective of her roots, a blend of fine lace and vibrant African prints, accented by coral beads. When she reached the throne, Obinna stood to receive her. The crowd fell silent as he placed a crown intricately woven with gold threads and studded with rare stones upon her head. The moment was as breathtaking as it was surreal. Applause erupted, thunderous and unending, echoing the combined hope of an entire people who believed that with this union a golden era was at hand. Yet amidst the pageantry, Adaora felt her heart drift back to the village that once scorned her, to the kitchen floor where she had slept, to the battered clay pot she used for cooking. She thought of Mama Nwakigo, the children at the safe house in Lagos, and the community center in Umidam. This crown, she realized, was not just an adornment. It was a symbol of responsibility. Once seated beside Obinna on the dais, she bowed her head in silent prayer, asking for wisdom, humility, and the strength to bear the mantle of queenship with honor. The ceremony culminated in a lavish feast, but Adaora and Obinna made sure it wasn't just for royalty. People of all classes were invited to partake, transforming the palace grounds into a tapestry of dancing, feasting, and merriment. In a touching moment, a group of children from the Lagos safe house performed a brief musical show in honor of their beloved patroness, the Queen from the Bush. Adaora's eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude. In their innocent voices, she heard the echo of her own past, the tender cry of a child abandoned in a kola tree. Now, that same child had become a queen. It was proof that destiny could be as unpredictable as it was beautiful. Looking back on the journey, from a terrified girl abandoned at birth, exploited in a harsh household, forced to marry a beggar, and then thrust into a hidden legacy, Adaora knew she had lived a story that resonated far beyond any simple fairy tale. Her existence now carried a message that one's beginnings need not dictate one's future, and that empathy could turn even the darkest experiences into light for others. Settling into her role as Queen of Edu, she continued to expand charitable work, ensuring that the resources of the kingdom reached those most in need. Together with Obinna, she championed educational reforms, launched healthcare initiatives in remote areas, and fostered cultural programs that celebrated the kingdom's heritage without succumbing to old hierarchies. And though her life now sparkled with pomp and admiration, she never lost the core of who she was, that girl who once found solace in humming songs by the moonlit river. Her story, in essence, stood as testament that true royalty is not merely inherited but cultivated through resilience, kindness, and the courage to embrace one's destiny. Years later, Adaora and Obinna returned once more to Umidam, this time in a grand procession that filled the dusty roads with mirthful chants and dancing children. The same paths she once swept now burst with celebration, as if the very ground rejoiced in her triumph. In the regal courtyard of Edu's palace, she would sometimes sit and reminisce about her humble beginnings, the nights she went hungry, and the day she feared her life was over when she was wed to a man deemed worthless. Little did she know, the beggar was the key to unlocking a realm of purpose and transformation. Not all royalty is born in palaces. Some, like Aurora, are found crying in the bush, destined to rise above their pain and restore hope to those who need it most. Now, dear viewers, if Aurora's journey has touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales, share with your friends to spread the message of hope, and leave a comment below about the lessons you've learned from this remarkable story. Your voice matters. Let it echo in the grand halls of our collective narrative. Hit the like button if you love the story, and subscribe for more stories like this, and leave your thoughts in the comments section. Cheers!